Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't know who they're going to be after they lay that down. So you can still have the trauma and not have the trigger. So that's when we go and weed the garden and we pull all the dandelions out of the garden, and then we throw them out.
Mm-hmm.
We don't replant them. That's what we need to do when we're in this situation. So that way you don't take it into the next relationship. Or you don't take it everywhere you go to work. People go take stuff to work even with them, and they're nasty as heck. And it's nobody's fault.
So having the trauma without the trigger means that you have not, am I hearing you correctly, in that you have not replaced it, because the world abhors a vacuum. So you haven't replaced it with something growing, something healthy. You've just pulled the weeds and left it.
Oh, no, we're going to pull the weeds and we're planting a flower garden.
All right.
But in the analogy, are the weeds the trigger?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm glad I caught that, because, you know, one of the things that I've just recently come to the awareness of is my pain in my past. It's helped to shape who I am. Real life for real families. Hurts, habits, and hang-ups happen in every family.
Jerry and I are here with tools to help you trust God, clean house, and tell the truth to ramp up the joy in your family.
You have what it takes.
It's time to become sober on purpose for His purpose. Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Tanya.
We have this fabulous guest, and she is a functional medicine coach. Do you know what a functional medicine person is?
No.
I know. We're going to have to figure that out. But we've had the opportunity to talk to her a couple times, and it's amazing. So it's Marina Crispi, functional medicine, life and health coach.
Does she have a website?
She does have a website, which is Marina Crispi, hnp.com. And she's also on a mission, just like we are. She's on a mission to record 50 podcasts in 60 days. And she's doing that right now. And she's coming out with some great stuff, just like the In the Weeds stuff. So hello, Marina.
Hello. How are you? Thanks for having me.
We are super well today, and we're excited to hear more about what functional medicine is.
Functional medicine is when East and West come together and they work together cohesively for the patient. So if they're looking for a holistic side of it, but then they also need the regular medical side of it, we come together as a team and we create a balanced environment for them. I was diagnosed at 30 years old with rheumatoid arthritis. And I was told that I'd probably be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 50. And 50 is like knocking on the door right around the corner. And I'm not in a wheelchair, and I've been in remission for 14 years. So
wow.
I've done that with holistically. So no medication and doing well.
One of the things that drew me to you was not only the 50 and 60, because it's only a brave woman that tries to do 50 podcasts in 60 days. And she's doing a great job too, is she is also a strong believer. And she also feels, based on the functional medicine and her own life experience, that a lot of these things happened out of trauma, which is the other conclusion that we're coming to with addiction, that childhood trauma, that all those types of things, that addiction is just a symptom of what happened in your early life or what happened in your later life.
No, I've known that for a while.
Because you're brilliant. So tell us a little bit about the trauma background and how you work with that with the functional medicine.
Well, with functional medicine, in all of our stuff, we all have a history. We have a past. We have stuff that creeps up. And a lot of times our body, I always use the analogy of a garbage can. We stuff so much in the garbage can, and then when we go to empty it, the bag rips. In ourselves, we're either a healer or we're the one that's trying to make everything good, or if we're in a family where mom is being abused by dad or vice versa, or if you have, I grew up with a very demonstrative father. He was very strict. It was his way or no way, walking on eggshells. So with our bodies, it's like when you take that bag out after you've stuffed it so much and all those little holes start to rip through, that's what happens to our bodies. It only can take so much of the stress and the stuffing of that stress of what's going on in the household that it starts to break down. Or we start to lean on other things to alleviate what it is that we're going through, or to mask it, to cover it for the time. Sometimes it's food, it's alcohol. Sometimes, as with me, I had rheumatoid arthritis. I had an autoimmune disease and bleeding ulcers at 15 years old. So the trauma is that stuff that we stuff down.
So when the bag begins to leak, it pours out into the body, and the body can show up, like you said, with the bleeding ulcers. What are other ways that it shows up for people?
It shows up with cancer's one of them. People wonder, I've taken care of myself all along, but if I'm swallowing all this stuff or trying to be perfect in this area, or when I was born, my family was telling me I'm going to be this when I grow up. You can't just be who you want to be, or you have this all, like with my father and my growing up. My father was a firefighter, so he would come home and I would always listen to how he addressed my mom as to whether I would even come out of my room or address him. So and I was a pleaser. I wanted everybody to be happy. So inflammation in my body, you can go to, as my husband he's recovered now 33 years. His stress was physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So to get rid of that pain, he drank it away, and then when he became sober, he didn't know his life as anything other than that. So we tend to or we can eat to cover up what we're doing. Emotional eating.
Can I?
Yes, that is both of our drugs of choice. I go for the chocolate or anything that will bring that serotonin reuptake in there. Or I have found myself, as all my men, I have 2 sons too, as all my men are getting bigger and louder, I'm running to the cupboard more frequently.
I totally get it. I have 2 sons also. But we also do, like my son is also recovered. He's 26 years old. He's clean and sober, almost 5 years now. And he's also bulimic.
Wow.
So what we can't control in the physical because of the stuff that happened to us in our past, we can control it with what we eat. We control it with the opposite of being a bulimic, or drinking or drugging or whatever it is of our choice, our shopping addiction. It just can go any way. There's not just one way to cover it.
Jerry used to do something that I think is like you used to do with your father, is he would call home before he got home.
Oh, I still do that.
tell her why you would do that.
Just kind of checking the water temperature, you know what I mean, to see if it was safe to come home, and I would come home even if it wasn't, but you kind of want to prepare yourself emotionally, get in the right mindset.
He wanted to get his armor on to throw down if he needed to when he walked through the door.
have all my defenses up and cackles up before I came home if I needed them.
I can totally understand. I got married at 20, engaged at 19, because I was like, I got to get out of here, Not that I don't love my husband, but I think that also brought us into other craziness in our marriage. But because I had to get out from being under his thumb.
What are you take your group, you have a Facebook group too, and you take people in that Facebook group through some master classes and through some healing. What are some really simple things that our audience would be interested in? We've got mostly people who have more chemical addictions. What are some simple things they could start looking at in their lives as far as where to start looking?
Some of the steps that I use that are some of the easy things that somebody can do at home from just listening this is recognize the injury to your soul, where it happened and who the characters were in that process, who played the parts. Sometimes we don't really want to go back there because it's too hard for us to look at. And then we need to sort of take responsibility where it is our responsibility. I mean, if it's something that happened to you at 2, 5, 8 years old, where you can't take that responsibility, be it molestation or, physical abuse, even emotional abuse. But when we're at 48, 49, even 35, 36, then it's time for us to take responsibility to get that healing done so we can live a productive life. And then the third big one that I completely believe in 100% is forgive.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. And that's where I get a lot of resistance. Like, how do I forgive somebody who's done that to me? Well, you have to remember you're not forgiving them for them. It's for you to heal.
Amen.
And forgive yourself too, because we're harder to forgive ourselves than we are to forgive others.
Yep.
That's where I think you struggled. I know that's where I struggled the most. And I think that's where you were commenting on another podcast that you struggled with your 9th step.
Remind me.
It's your struggle, Goofy. What would you say to people about forgiving, especially men? What would you say to men about forgiving themselves?
Well, I think you touched on something that was really, really good. And it's this, I think it's important for me to be honest with the fact that everything I do is self-motivated, right? Even if I was to get in front of the speeding car to save my child, it's not because I'm some righteous or noble person. It's because I would rather get hit by the car than have them get hit by the car. So it's a selfish motive. Now, I went into that first to kind of talk about, the point where you brought up about forgiving other people who've wronged us for our benefit. Because really, we're not hurting them with our stress or our anxiety or our resentment. We're hurting ourselves, right? So, and in my experience, to find the energy to be well and to become emotionally stable and sober, I have to be honest with the fact that I'm doing this for me, not for my kids, not for my wife, not for my creator, but this is for me so that I can be well and that I can get the benefits. And hey, and in the long run, they're going to get the benefits too, all of them.
Right.
But if my knowledge of the reality of why I'm doing this isn't in line, then something's going to break down along the way.
Correct. And 3/4 of the time, our abuser, the person who's wronged us, they're not even thinking about your feelings.
Yeah.
They're not going to bed at night saying, oh, Marina's sad today because I did X. They don't care. They're not even thinking about it.
Right.
So for us to hang on to it is just going to make us sick. Mm-hmm. And it's going to make us miserable. And yes, be selfish for that amount of time, because showing your children and your wife how you can heal and forgive somebody who wronged you sets an example on how they're going to move through. And it allows us to forgive each other more easily also in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's something you practice and you get better at.
It's super huge in the Christian life too. I think to be authentic, to actually follow Christ, we have to not say this didn't happen. We have to say it did happen. And how do we work through healing it? Not
right. And he also says in the word, in his prayer, our Father, if we go there at the end, and we typically, depending on your denomination of your Christianity or your religion, at the end, it used to say of the Our Father, he will not forgive, because if we have to forgive others' trespasses, or he will not forgive ours.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're holding on to grudges and, anger and grief and all of this and towards someone, and we don't let it go, how is he supposed to forgive us?
Yeah.
For when we come to him, and he forgives us and those slates wiped clean. How many of us do that for someone, even for ourselves? We can't forgive and just wipe the slate clean. And he does that for us. So it's always something that I try to keep in the back of my head. It's hard when we're in the flesh, right?
Right. No, and that message, I think, is throughout the New Testament, the idea, and probably in the Old Testament too. I'm just not as familiar with it, but the idea that we're going to be judged on the same measure that we judge everybody else.
Correct.
But we're also going to be shown enormous mercy too. And it's a matter of, that's where I think a lot of people, including myself, get stuck, is just just show up and ask for forgiveness. And in the 9th step for the 12-step process, we're taught that even if the other person doesn't forgive you or gets angry with you, or, this is not something they can accept, you've done your part of the work.
Yeah. And come in full circle. I mean, the 9th step, yeah, you're trying to make right the wrongs of the past. But again, this is so that we can be well and we can be the hands of Christ and we can go out into the world and be better people and serve his purposes more fully and never more present than in our home life and in our personal relationship with ourselves and with our Creator. But again, this is about us. And I want to go back again and just make sure that I was clear. Selfishness, I think, is not always bad. I think we've made that word really bad. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they're really clear that they distinguish between self-centered selfishness, where I'm the only one who's going to benefit,
right,
and then selfishness, which is the reality. In my experience, humans are always acting self-interested. So anything that they do, they tithe, they give to charity, they donate their time. If they're really super awesome, they go to junior achievement, like we just did. But again, it's because we're going to hopefully get more out of it than we spend.
And we did. We got a lot out of it this afternoon.
Yeah.
Marina, if somebody is stuck, and I have these places in my life too, if somebody is stuck and they come to a functional medicine coach, what would they expect? You were talking on your podcast that we got to listen to just before we came here about starting with gut health. How are you going to work with that person?
Well, when I meet with somebody, I just listen.
Mm-hmm.
I start to listen and I take notes. And then I start to ask questions. And usually those questions will lead to where we have to start first.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the gut or is it in the heart? 3/4 of the time it's in the heart and then the gut, but they all work together. We have more transmitting neurons going from the gut to the brain than from the brain to the gut. That's where our stress is. That's where our cortisol is. That's where our grief is. Everything sits there. So yes, great gut health is really important, but we need to go back to the trauma, where this started, so where the bag ripped.
Mm-hmm.
So I typically listen first, then I'll ask some questions, and then I know where to go from there. And a lot of the time we're resistant because we don't want to go back there. And if it's something that happened to you at 5, we go back to that 5-year-old you.
Mm-hmm.
And we heal you from there and bring you to where you are today.
How do you make it safe? What kind of coaching techniques? How do you make it safe to go back into those trauma experiences to heal them?
Well, my safety net is there's no judgment with me.
Mm-hmm.
I leave it very clear. If they don't feel that they want to go further, we put the brakes on, mm-hmm. and we'll move on to another area until they're ready to come back. I allow them to know that I've walked through a whole heap of stuff. So I will share something that I've walked through so they know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't the first time I'm hearing this, or I survived it too. So if I'm able to, they're able to, and that allows them to open up a little bit more to talk with me.
No, that's cool. And again, in my experience, what we're talking about from an AA perspective is a 4th step where we dig into our inventory of our emotional inventory, and that a lot of times you can't just go to that area of pain and tear it all open and dissect it and look at it. But each time you approach it, you're able to get a little bit closer. And if if it gets too painful, then yeah, if it's cool to back off and revisit it later, well, odds are you're going to be able to get a little bit deeper into it each time you go back, right?
Right.
And you're letting the person self-direct. This is not Marina's choices for you.
No. Typically, though, I will get a feel inside of me that I know where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
And I can ask them a question, and then all of a sudden their eyes will open up. And I know I hit on something. And I'll say, do you want to go here now? Or would you like to step over here and we can go here?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll allow them to go where they need to go at that moment. But typically when I hit on that thing, then their eyes and they're like, wow, she's onto something. She knows something. It's not that I know intuitively, I do feel things, and I've been doing this for a while, so I get a feel of it. And then they'll just open up. And I'll say to them, well, I know this is hard, but let me just share a little bit of something about me. I have no qualms or anything to share what I've walked through. I've walked through suicide. I've walked through addiction. I've walked through abuse. I've walked through so many different things, marriage that has fallen apart and come back together, at the divorce court twice and walked away from it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I've walked through a lot of stuff, and I don't care what I share with them.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with I apologize.
That's okay.
Do you want to finish?
No, go ahead.
Are you familiar with the 12-step process?
Yes, my husband and son both went through.
Yeah, well, you're talking like you've done it. I mean, you're talking like a good sponsor would talk, you know.
Oh.
Really, you know, you're touching on a lot of the points that are brought up in the big book and in the 12 by 12, like as how a sponsor should approach these sensitive issues with their sponsee.
Oh, thanks. I've not gone to the meetings. I have gone to a couple.
Mm-hmm.
But when my husband was going through, he wanted me to do all the work, and he didn't want to do the work. So he needed to go on his own and do the work. And then I would meet him here or there, so that way he wasn't relying on me. When my son was going through the work, we were doing AA and NA, both.
Right.
And he was in a day structure, and then he just had family connection. During the day, we would have to come once a week, come together for family meeting. So I do know some of it. I do know about the big book. I do know about the steps, but I've never actually sat in on the meetings on a regular basis because I couldn't continue to enable.
We understand.
Yeah.
Because Jerry will say to me, do you want to work my program? I'm like, yes, I really do want to work your program. Please let me do that. What I like about the functional medicine is if you have a really good sponsor, they might look at your eating habits and the things you say you want to do and you're not doing and all those types of things. But Jerry's take on sponsorship, what is the responsibility of the sponsor?
Get you sober.
Yeah, just to keep you sober. That's flat it. And I see the functional medicine, as you've described it, as we've talked about it before, is very whole. That you're going to deal with diet, you're going to deal with exercise, you're going to deal with what's going on emotionally, what's going on in the marriage, what's going on with the kids, whatever that client is ready to deal with, you're going to set and hold that space for them. Am I kind of reading that right?
That's correct. Yep. We touch on everything.
Can we talk a little bit more about it? Because I'm not familiar with it at all. You mentioned that it's kind of a blending of Eastern and Western, and I think you used the word medicine. Is that right? Yeah. So is it like encompassing of both emotional and physical, spirit, like psychological and physical medicine? So in other words, like supplements, diet, maybe acupuncture, maybe antibiotics. I don't know. I mean, I really don't understand. I don't know.
The whole gambit. So if somebody comes to me and they, let's just say autoimmune disease, me with rheumatoid arthritis, I have to see a rheumatologist. They prescribe a lot of medication. I'm not against medication, but meditation, prayer, Bible, the whole gambit.
Nice. So kind of.
So that's where we bring the East and the West together.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your group and where to find you and the services you offer and those types of things. And for the addiction population or for people, it sounds like codependency would fit quite neatly in there as well. What are the things that they could come and find help with?
They can reach out to me through my website, or even if they wanted to find me on Facebook, I have a Facebook group in there called Living on the Right Side of Healthy. So when we're living on the right side of healthy, it doesn't matter what you're walking through.
Mm-hmm.
We just want you emotionally, physically, and spiritually healthy for you. then you can be productive in everything else that you want to do in your life. So Living on the Right Side of Healthy is the private group on Facebook. They can find me there. If they are coming for addiction, we're going to look at more than just your addiction. We're going to search, we're going to find it, and we're going to work that out. And you're going to have homework. The homework isn't horrible, but it's just, we all need to continue to work. As you know, you don't just go through the 12 steps and then you're out. It's something that you have to continue.
You're cured.
You're cured. I did mine 12 months and I was done.
You get a stamp on your forehead and you're like, you're good.
And it's over.
Go and be well.
So there's a process, there's homework, there's things. I do packages. It's either 3, 6, 12, depending on where they want to go. I'm so open that if a woman or a husband or a wife, if I'm working with one and they're struggling in their marriage, I'm so easy with, okay, let's bring the other person in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we need that, a mediator, or not even the mediator, but just so we can talk clearly to one another.
Mm-hmm.
I do bring in scripture. I do bring in, I have this little thing that I call a God jar. And it's just a ball jar that you throw whatever's angering you or upsetting you at that moment. You write it down, you throw it in there, you seal the top so you don't continue to carry it with you. You're releasing it and it's yours. It's not yours anymore, so you don't carry it. We do a lot of that kind of technique of putting things down and not picking them back up.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes what I do with them also is if we do a one-on-one in my office, we'll do meditation. I can even do it on here. We'll do meditation. Sometimes we'll do some hand techniques to bring our panic down and get us to breathing easily. So there's a bunch of different steps that I go through with them, and they will have homework, as I said before, and the homework is only just for them to get better.
Mm-hmm.
I also do full day events where I can just spend 5 to 6 hours with somebody. And that's just totally intensive, where they're ready to dig deep. They're ready to get rid of that trauma. They're ready to lay it down and they're ready to move forward. That day is exhausting for them. But in the end, we do have a couple of follow-ups afterwards just to make sure they're in the right place. But when I do a session like that with somebody, we're going in and we're going to get the root now, and we're just pulling it out.
Who's eligible for what do you need to know about yourself? Do you talk them through it and say that's going to work or that's not going to work? Or who's eligible for those deep sessions that I'm assuming are extremely healing once you get done? It's just hard work doing it.
Yeah. What I do is on my website, you can book a 30-minute coffee with me. We can do it in person or we can do it online. Mm-hmm. And I just go down a series of questions with you to see where you are. Are you really in it to get it done immediately because you're over it? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to take the process and work it out? It depends on the person. Some people just cannot handle that extensive amount of time digging. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's you're going to laugh, you're going to cry. Sometimes you might want to take a nap, and I've done that. I've allowed them to just take a nice 15-20 minute nap and then come back, so that way they're refreshed, because it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. So I just listen to them, I watch their body language, and I watch those kind of things so I know if they're ready for that or not.
What I really like about this, what I'm hearing is it sounds to me like, there's no real religion as far as, the way to be well. Like there's no hard and fast. And you can, of course, chime in and tell me that I'm not hearing you correctly. A lot of times I think it's so easy to get stuck in the idea that the method that we used is the right method and it worked for us and therefore it works for everybody else. But just the idea of trying to blend and be open to all the different aspects of Eastern and Western medicine all by itself is really open-minded. It reminds me of, Bruce Lee, who was obviously not a believer, but I think a really smart guy. And he said, because during the time he came up with the martial arts, they were like religions. and everybody's art was the right one, and they kind of argued with which one was the best and which one was the right. And he kind of came around and was speaking blasphemy at the time, where he was like, no, you absorb what's useful to you and you discard the rest.
Right.
You know, and be open to a new way to do things. And if it works for you and your body and in your personal, if it works for you for your benefit, then use it, regardless of whose idea it was.
Right. This is how I look at it. We're all created differently. So there should be no diet. One diet's good for all.
Right.
Because we're all different. We all metabolize things different. We have different allergies, things like that. We all function on different levels. So if you don't look at it that way, and I'm just going to work with somebody in one way, it's not going to work for them, because we all function at different levels, and I'm a visual learner. Give me a manual and I'm going to take longer to read it, process it. You give me a diagram and I can figure it out. Mm-hmm. So that's how it is with people. You know, I can go at it one way with you and maybe not go the same way about it with Tanya.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I learn from lectures, right? Which is rare, I understand. But yeah, no, I completely agree. And of course, whenever I going back to the Bruce Lee thing, whenever I get around people and I'm trying to show them how something works, I just want to lecture to them.
And it doesn't work for many people. It really doesn't.
Well, that's me, because my husband is an electrical engineer. So everything's black and white. Everything goes this way, that way, and he knows how it's going to go.
Or you could die. Or you could die if it doesn't go the right way.
With me, I'm like, oh, we can go this way, or maybe we can change this if this doesn't work. And he was like, he doesn't get it. He's like, what are you doing? So we're all different. So there's no one way that I'm going to work with somebody. I need to really hear them and feel them and understand where they're coming from before I even step in.
So everything you do is very personal. It's very tailored to that person. And in your group, you also do some things, if I understand correctly, that people can take away with them and use it in the way that they need to do that. And the group is specifically for rheumatoid arthritis, or
it's based on autoimmune disease.
Okay.
But I have all walks of life in there. I have people with diabetes. I have people with alcoholism. I have people with eating disorders. I have all kinds of people, because they might be coming in for autoimmune disease, but they have all these other things that they also brought with them. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we work on all of that in that group.
If somebody was certainly dealing with, they've been in and out of rehab, they just can't figure out what it is that's bothering them, or they've been in and out of relationships and they're still behaving in the codependent way, you are one of the coaches that could work with them. You're one of the coaches that could work with the whole person that may not be getting treated at different singular treatments.
Because, you know, when you've been to therapy, what do? You talk about the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. That's why so many people jump from therapist to therapist to therapist. And don't get me wrong, therapists are wonderful, and I think they serve a great purpose. But all you do is talk about it. You don't ever put it down. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, whatever your trauma is becomes your identity.
Right.
And if I put that down, who am I? Mm-hmm. You know, they don't know who they're going to be after they lay that down. So you can still have the trauma and not have the trigger. So that's when we go and weed the garden and we pull all the dandelions out of the garden, and then we throw them out. Mm-hmm. We don't replant them. That's what we need to do when we're in this situation. So that way you don't take it into the next relationship. Or you don't take it everywhere you go to work. People go take stuff to work even with them, and they're nasty as heck. And it's nobody's fault.
So having the trauma without the trigger means that you have not, am I hearing you correctly, in that you have not replaced it, because the world abhors a vacuum. So you haven't replaced it with something growing, something healthy. You've just pulled the weeds and left it.
Oh, no, we're going to pull the weeds and we're planting a flower garden.
All right.
But in the analogy, are the weeds the trigger?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm glad I caught that, because one of the things that I've just recently come to the awareness of is my pain in my past. It's helped to shape who I am, and I don't know that I want to. Recently I said to myself, I don't know if I could go back, if I would change it, because I like who I am now, and it helped to shape who I am today.
That's so
pains.
correct.
And that was huge for me. It came up when I was speaking with my pastor, as a matter of fact, and we were just joking around, but we were talking honestly too. And he was talking about the things that he did in his youth, and I said, but if you could go back, would you change it? And and I really caught him, because he's like, you know what, I don't know if I would.
But the great part of that is that is who you are. But every time it comes up, you're not going to be triggered by it.
Right. You don't have to let it define you.
The emotional piece is laid down. It's done. But you can say, I walked through that and I survived.
Amen. That's right.
That created me, but that's not who I am.
Yes. And and it doesn't have to shape who we become or where we go or define us and fix us in stone. It's so cool. Very powerful.
Well, and there's some people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There's some people that have been sexually abused, let's say. They carry that so deeply rooted in them that that's all that they think they are.
Yeah.
So when we can heal that piece, and I know it's huge, when we can heal that piece, it's who they grew into, but they don't have to carry that name tag any longer. Because when they carry that name tag, then they don't think they're worthy of true love. They don't think they're worthy of having a good relationship. They don't think they're worthy of having a good life. Or they think they have to fight for everything that they have, and they have to be the executive or the alpha person in the family so they can prove they're better than what happened to them.
Right. In AA too, talks about how these experiences and these pains and these mistakes make us uniquely qualified to minister to people who struggle with similar things or same things, which, the sexual trauma thing is really a touchy subject, but, for the most part, I think most people haven't experienced that, which is great. So it just makes that many more qualified or uniquely qualified ministers out there, that much more valuable when they've come to healing themselves.
Right. Exactly.
It's amazing to me when you can be thankful for, if I hadn't married Jerry and dealt with the fact that he was an addict and I was a codependent, I would have never grown up. I would have been miserable with whatever children I did have, with whatever man I did run around, with whatever person I did push around, because I was that person. It was coming up against his addiction that made me get myself together. There was no other choice.
To this day, I continue to give her plenty of things to work on. I'm here
that's
to help.
part of marriage.
I'm here to help you grow spiritually.
I have 34 years with my husband, married 27 this year. And you're always being tested.
Yeah.
you're always pushing the other.
I honestly believe that's what God designed the union of marriage to be, is to help strengthen our souls and our character. So, because what a challenging relationship, and what a great opportunity to be able to work on the things that we struggle with, because that's one of the things our spouse has a unique ability to do, is to trigger us, right?
Right.
Or mirror the bad behavior, either way, we mirror it back to each other.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly that. Marina, it has been so much fun talking to you. Give us your website one more time and your Facebook group, and that's where our listeners can get a hold of you. And you don't have to have an autoimmune system issue to come and talk to you.
Nope.
You do hard work and good work with people from all different categories, and you don't have to have addiction. You can be struggling with something simple like managing your weight or figuring out why you're in the cabinet when all three men walk in.
And
really loud.
what about for people who are struggling with somebody else's addiction? Is that open?
Yes. Yeah. And it's amazing that you asked that, because how many of us that are the wife or the spouse of somebody, I was dating my husband when he got sober, and everybody was like, why are you bothering? You're not even married. Why are you going through this with him? And I'm like, well, because I'm here to help him.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always here to help.
Mm-hmm.
And then we forget to take care of us.
Absolutely.
So then we become bitter, resentful, because he sucked the life out of me because I was trying to help. You know, so I do work with people who are the spouse or the partner of the addict, because sometimes the life can just get sucked out of you because you're trying to help them so much. And I teach them how to step away.
That's
so
awesome.
My son has had a girlfriend for 8 years, and she's gone through all the rehab with him. And at one point I said to her, I love you, but if you want to go, I understand. It's your choice. You're not married to him. You're not engaged to him. You don't owe him anything. And she just looked at me like, really? And I'm like, yeah, we'll always love you. But you do not have to walk through this if you don't want to. She's still here, and I still love her. But sometimes we have to give that person the understanding that they're still loved. And if they did decide to leave, and I don't encourage that, but I do let them know if there's abuse, physical, the other person really doesn't want to get better. You're still loved, and you still can move on with your life. People aren't going to hate you, and if they are, then that's not your worry. It's theirs. That's their own.
That's so cool. You know, I'm thinking that probably strengthened her resolve to stay in more than it did give her an excuse to come out. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because all of a sudden you're making it a completely voluntary thing, and there's no social obligation of, oh, I'm going to be judged if I dump this guy and move on. And then I just, from my perspective, it would make it so much easier to stay in, knowing that if I reached my tolerance, I would walk out and nobody would judge me for it.
Right.
Or it could even be a backhanded comment of, I'm so glad you're here with him. I'm so glad you're taking care of him. I'm so glad you're doing this. Then you've just landed a whole bunch of burden on somebody who we really don't have the responsibility for somebody else. We may be accountable, but we're not responsible for them. They make their own choices.
Very good.
We could talk to you for hours. Go ahead and give us your website and your Facebook group.
Okay, my website, you can find me at marinacrispi.hnp.com. You can find me at Living on the Right Side of Healthy on Facebook. It's a private group, so you would have to just answer a couple of questions to get in. And then you can also find me on my podcast, Heal Your Heart, Heal Your Body.
And it's a fantastic podcast. It's on iTunes. So go over and give her a listen and download and subscribe. That's what really gets podcasts up to the top, is subscribe. She is doing 50 podcasts in 60 days.
Lots of new content coming out.
Yeah, so help her out. She's got a lot for you to listen to. So Marina, we are so thankful that we bumped into you, and we really appreciate all your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Be blessed. Have a great day.
Hey, Jerry, we talk about living sober on purpose all the time. What is real life for real families?
Well, real life for real families is just dealing with the trials and tribulations of daily life as they come.
But we're also looking for growth, reaching our goals. We've had different things come in our lives that we want to achieve. How have we made that happen?
We work with people who are talented, who we admire, who we want some of their attributes to be imprinted on us.
And that came to us through several sessions of coaching with some international coaches and also some local coaches, which has really changed my life. How has it moved you forward? Oh,
it's definitely given me the ability to have a sounding board and to be able to talk through things that allowed me to figure out where I was and what I wanted, having somebody to help direct me.
And that's where coaching comes into play. I'm Tanya Joya, and I am a recovery coach, someone that helps you get unstuck, figure out what's next, and deal with fear and anxiety after someone in your family gets sober or during the sobriety process. Because people often feel like
the other shoe is going to drop.
And that really is a hard, stuck place. You don't feel like you can move forward with your dreams, with your goals, because you're constantly watching and waiting for something to happen. How about making a change in your life and looking forward? And to learn more about me, hop onto thejoyousfamily.com, The Joyous Family Facebook group, or The Joyous Family Instagram. And I'd love to do a discovery call with you. Just about 15 minutes of your time to see if coaching is right for you. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from you.